Cool. Okay, for those of you who saw the first preview, now we're going to actually start. I shouldn't have to restart after this one. So I'm Ben Savage, the founder and CEO of Veritas Automata. Our name stands for Truth or Trust in Automation. We came to that name because we do a lot of work with IoT and with other technologies, and for us it's very important to have, when we build a piece of software or a system, to have the transactions and records that it executes as something that are understandable, reproducible, and traceable to why they did that and when it did that. This is important. We love to play with AI. Well, if you're not careful with AI, you're going to get something that was done, but you won't know why it did it. We've all been in there where we're trying to debug a system and trying to figure that out. So that's a little bit about us and how we think and what we do. So we're going to talk about machine learning, Gen AI, we're going to talk about cloud, and we're going to talk about IoT as we go through this presentation. So if we go to my bio, I covered a lot of it when I introduced Veritas Automata. Also, if you've ever been in a room with a demo of me, there's a couple of my team members here. They know I have this superpower that something will break if I'm near it. We kind of saw that for those of you who were in the main room with Victor and Whitney a little bit ago. I have the ability to break any piece of technology just by my presence. It does mean I'm pretty good at fixing it though in the long run, because you have to learn, if you break it, how do you make it work again? So that's probably the quick 2-minute bio on me. We can get to the rest of it as we go through. We'll see how many times that I break even my own presentation there. So as I mentioned, we're going to put all of this together. So one of the things I'm going to give is a quick definition. When I talk about artificial intelligence, there are really two key technologies in there that we need to separate. There's conventional machine learning. So that is something like the transformer that's going to do image recognition, or a neural network or something like that, where they're clearly defined, they're reproducible if you put the same data in them, and you can prove why they're making the decision. There's a whole other cool school of things called generative AI. Those are all based off of, well, they're not all based off the same tech, but generally they're going to be based off the generative pre-trained transformers. That's where the GPT and ChatGPT comes from. But the key thing to remember, they're probabilistic algorithms. Hopefully most of you have had some statistical background. Probability is not I get the same thing, it's the chance something might occur. So when you think about that, you're now asking these GPT models for an answer and expecting the same result every time. It doesn't take a lot for you to change the probability of the way something does it. So you've got to think about that when you're applying the tools. So when we start talking about cloud native, we're big fans of Kubernetes in the cloud. We like to use that because it lets us build scalable, resilient solutions that we can go do lots of things where we start to mix the edge and the cloud into one piece, or keep them very isolated from each other. And then when I talk about IoT, I'm going to use that term to cover Internet of Things. These are things that are usually not a full computer. So they are something less. They might be your Nest thermostat, they might be a security system, they might be an intelligent lock, they might be all kinds of other sensors, and we do a lot of work with those deploying them. And we tend to fuse all of these together into complete systems that we deploy. So here's where my inner ADD comes in. Let's go back one slide, because I happen to, see, I break stuff. I said Gen AI. We do have ADD, so that's where the squirrel gift, that is one of my favorite ones that I've been able to slip into the presentation. So our team likes to have a lot of fun, and we like to apply technology. So I think many of you have been there in those long demo days where it's going on, an hour or 2 or 3, and all the teams are doing their demos at the end of a sprint or an epic. And sometimes those conversations wander a little bit. My team is distributed from Toronto down to southern Argentina. We've got one guy who's escaped off to Spain, but most of us are in North or South America, or Central America. We've got a great team here in Costa Rica, actually, which is how we got the opportunity to come and join this event. But the Teams chats get going. We also all love music. So in the Slack chat, everyone's going, and someone hears a chicken in the background of someone else's presentation. So there starts to be a conversation, because we all like to give each other a little bit of a hard time. Is someone smuggling chickens? Is there something? And for those of us who love music, we realize, wait a minute, the Chicken Smuggler sounds like a really good band name. Then, because a number of us are from Ohio, Kentucky is the next state over. There's a certain Kentucky fried chicken brand that people may know, and their mascot is the Colonel, right? So we come to this idea of, we've now got a band name, the Colonel and the Chicken Smugglers. We did decide it was probably a vegan hardcore band, because that would be who would use that name. Normal punk band would not probably want that one. But then we start realizing, because this is about 3 years ago, oh, we can go and create the lyrics for a song in ChatGPT. And we can go create an image using Midjourney of what the band looks like. So we've got the picture there. And then the question comes in, can you create music using AI yet or not? And the question is, yeah, kinda. Let's get the mouse over. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. So this is what you could do in 2023. Oh, fine. Yep. This morning, sunlight's going in the heartland with a... See, I break stuff. We'll go over here for a minute. So that was okay-ish, not too interesting. But you come over to what you can do now. It's starting to get, see, I break stuff. It's starting to get better. And the lyric delivery is much better than it was. So by the way, that's all AI generated, or Gen AI. That's all one shot. So we put the lyrics in, we did that as one shot, didn't edit those, put that into the tool. We were using Udio, I think, for this one. So there's a ton of power that's come with this tool. So you got to think about when you use it right. Also, though, you can now create video. So let's go see how much else I break. Nope, we went backwards. There we go. So now you can create video and lip sync it. So this is taking that song and dropping it into Kling. And it's now you start to have a music video for your band. I'll be honest, the AI video is still a little creepy sometimes when you play with it, but it's there. And then if you spend a little more time on it, you get one of our team logos.
To our regularly scheduled presentation.
And you can see when you use it right.
Regularly
Oh, see, remember I said I break things? You're in the room for a whatever. But the point is that technology is really, really cool. That's all I'm going to talk about Gen AI in this presentation, because I think it's cool, but it's not the right application for a lot of business use cases, at least the ones that we've been working on historically, because I need predictable, consistent answers. But if you want to create an awesome chatbot or way to interact with your application, Gen AI is the way to go now, whether you're using voice or using text. So you got to think about that. So as we start looking at all this, I mentioned that we weave all of these solutions together. So I had the IoT that is now at the edge, in the ground, or on the customer site, that is streaming data to the cloud. Okay, one device, not that hard to think about. 2 devices, not that bad. 100, really not that bad once you've done it. 1,000 is starting to get to be a challenge. 150,000 is a real challenge. These are all devices streaming back to your cloud globally, and they're all giving you information. So do I let a person make decisions based on that? Do I just send alerts and bombard some poor person with a bazillion alerts? We've all been in systems that weren't configured right. Or do I start to use AI to be able to make intelligent decisions when there's an event happening, and maybe even start to use some of the generative AI to translate the logs to say, here's what you might want to go look at. I'm still a little iffy on the last one. I don't trust it yet, but it's feasible to go do. So that's also where you hear us talking about the cloud native, though, because if I have all these devices coming in, I need to be able to scale and flex my cloud depending on what the volume of what's going on in the system is. Or if any of you have ever been in a situation where you have a large scalable solution and you have a network drop periodically, then you get what all of our worst nightmare is. You don't have all your systems coming in periodically or on some kind of somewhat randomness. Everyone shows up at once. And then if you don't set your systems up right, they go hide in a corner because they've just had 10,000 devices or 100,000 devices all call home at once, unless you have a way to go distribute that. Where'd I go? So we kind of covered that one. So you're going to find I jump around in this. This is the ADD in me. So if I've confused anyone, don't hesitate to ask questions, or if I've said something and you want to figure out where I'm going with it, please do. So we were talking about Kubernetes. That's the backbone of our workloads. We do a lot with serverless as well. So related but different technology to Kubernetes, right? So serverless is where you're doing function as a service, and you may have specialized things in that. So some of the Gen AI work we've actually done as serverless. So that way when I do the ingest and the chunking, I'm using serverless to go do that because I don't need to run those jobs continuously. Whereas some of my IoT servers, I need to have running continuously to bring some of the technology in that we work with. So that's a technology choice you can make. So the other piece that you've got to think about with all this is security. So it's really easy to go throw all of this up, but how are you encrypting the data at rest? How are you encrypting the data at motion? How are you managing all the certificates? I can tell you from experience, if you're not thinking about certificate management on day one, you're going to be regretting it on, I don't know, probably day 180, once you've realized that you've got too many of them out there and you're trying to remember which one expires when. I have some team members that may be feeling that pain at the moment as I was watching some of the Slack messages come in that there was a little bit of a systems issue because they weren't staying on top of it. And that can be a challenge if you don't think about it. But it's important, right? Because that's how you make sure that you don't have unauthorized either activity in your system or applications running, which can be very important for your customers in the long run. We'll see how many times I go the wrong way. So we're going to jump into 2 case studies because I always like to do show and tell. This is also where I probably should have warned you. I'm a CEO. I'm not the guy who's going to be doing the super deep technical demo. So you're going to see me cover some of the things that from a business perspective, and I'm talking about this from a business leader's perspective, whether it's a manager or an owner of a company. And if you're a technologist, these are important mindsets to understand, because as you are building the technology, you have to be able to sell these ideas to your manager and maybe to their manager and maybe to the CIO or the CTO or the chief product officer or the CEO of the business. Because if you can't get that across, you may have a better technology, but they're not going to agree with it because they don't understand the technological benefit that it provides or the cost benefit it provides. And not all of those leaders are going to be able to challenge you at a technical level, but they may be looking at it through that business lens saying, hey, you've told me this is going to be better. It's also going to cost me 25% more. Why should I do that? So when you hear me coming through, I'm coming through at the business perspective and talking from a business and product kind of perspective there. As we had mentioned that we were looking at Gen AI earlier, here is a particular use case. We do a lot of business in the life science space. And one of the problems there is lots and lots of data. So imagine I am doing a clinical trial and I am going to, or I'm getting ready to do a clinical trial, and I need to go find what are all the drugs that people have done previously for this trial and what were the results. Or I'm someone else in the medical profession and I need to understand, I'm looking at this particular drug or this particular compound, what does it do and what tests have people done? And I don't want to, this is where kind of, all of us have gotten pretty good at Google Food, but it doesn't always find things unless you query it just the right way. This is where some of the Gen AI tools can help. So here, we'll do a quick demo. And so this is using publicly available data. So it's not using any of my customer data. You can go to the US, at least this may be changing because I'm from the US, but you can historically go to the FDA and get a list or get the results of all the clinical trials that have been done. 6 million some or a couple million some records of clinical trials. We've got about 6,000 of them in here in a test solution that we built. So this particular one uses Teams. So I've got a Teams agent here. So I can go ask it a question, unless I break everything. And now it's going to give me a question on that particular drug. And now I can start. So if you think about it as a researcher, now I can start to go through these, pull additional information. I can use this to go into the details of them as I need to. And then because of the way we built our solution, again, trust but verify with generative AI solutions, it lets me pop out to and see the exact study where somebody got these results. So as we're working with our customers, this can be really important to help them make better use of their data. And if you think about what I was talking about our name being truth or trust in automation, when you translate it, when you start working with these kind of solutions, if they're doing a clinical trial, it starts in a lab where someone's doing research and they have a lab notebook that gets digitized, and then they go through a bunch of tests that the machines are all doing. So I want to be able to tie all of that together for my customers so that when they're looking at the study, they can go find that whole history so they know how did we get here and why. And that can be very important because sometimes you're going to go, hey, the trial didn't work this time, but we've got a little bit different twist on a molecule, or we've got a new piece of technology that's going to let us apply it to somebody. So those are all different things to think about and that we think about as we build solutions. So I'm going to go to the next one. This is the one that most of my team here, if you talk with anyone with a VA shirt or you see the team at the booth, has been working on for the last couple of years. So this is a customer that we've worked with, and we do a number of things for them around order pickup. So imagine you're in a restaurant here today And this also shows the breadth that technology can take as you go work. We're talking about medical studies, now we're talking about food. So today, you guys have Rappi here in other parts of the world. We've got Uber, or we've got DoorDash, or we've got Just Eat, or Deliveroo. But even when I'm in China, where they're using Meituan, there's one common problem that this customer observed, that if you were sitting in a restaurant and someone is ordering, and it's a popular restaurant, you may see an army of delivery drivers getting off their bikes in their helmets. If it's raining, they're in their rain suits, and they're coming tromping in, interrupting everyone who's trying to eat in the restaurant. It's not the world's best experience as a customer of the restaurant. There's other challenges, though, that those restaurants have challenges when people pick up the wrong order. If a driver gets the wrong order, now they've got two issues. They've got one customer who's the driver's on the way and gets the wrong order, and the next driver shows up and can't find the order. So now they've got to remake two, which is a big cost. And then the last piece is there's a whole chargeback mechanism, if you've ever worked with any of those groups, where if the driver shows up at a certain time and the restaurant isn't ready, they can charge the restaurant, or the way the services can push back costs to the restaurant. In the long run, it ends up for the restaurant or the brand as a very hard situation to go succeed in. So they're all looking for technology to create both a better customer experience and get better data to go hand things off. So we help them build an IoT solution. So it's a device that sits in a restaurant. It then has 4 to 30 different compartments that all store your order. So I put my phone over there, but just imagine I've got my phone, you walk up to it, you scan your phone, your door opens, no one else can get your order, no one can take your order, no one can touch your order. And you know exactly when it was ready, because we know when it went into the device, and we know when someone picked it up. In concept, that sounds like a really simple idea, but now you start thinking about, what does it take to do that? I have to have a motor control system on each door to control the lock. I have to have a sensor in each compartment to know if there is something there or not. And I have to have lights and all kinds of other things to do wayfinding. That's just at the edge. Then I have to have the cloud, which is now going to have, where we're using Kubernetes to have all the deployment for the cloud architecture. And that's where now all the APIs are going. So all of these different brands, Uber, Burger King, Little Caesars, KFC, all these brands are now connecting in, and they are now sending orders in and getting real-time information to know when orders were picked up. So they've got better data to manage and predict everything. So something that starts really, really simple gets really, really complicated really fast, particularly when you start deploying hundreds and thousands of them. So for this particular solution, this is where we're using the cameras, because we've got to figure out, how do we get an image of what's going on in the compartment and be able to create a machine learning algorithm to know what should be in there and what should not be. This is also where DevOps comes in, because now I have a Kubernetes cluster at the edge, have a Kubernetes cluster in the cloud that are combined, that are meshed together, and I have machine learning models I need to get to each of these cameras. And so for every device, I'm adding 4 more cameras, 30 more cameras. And you do that times hundreds. That's the world that our team lives in, but you have to think about, how do you automate all of that from the beginning? Because if you don't, you can't keep on top of it manually. People can't log into devices fast enough. They can't log into the cluster fast enough to make changes. So we'll see if this catches up with me. There we go. So this is a representative architecture. So you're going to hear a term from the business perspective. And just be aware, in your careers, you're going to have business and marketing people are going to say, give me the architecture. That translates to a term I learned from IBM, which is, what they really want is the marketecture, something that looks like what you are deploying, and gives someone in the business an idea of what you are deploying, but is not necessarily the full technical architecture. One, because any of us who've actually dug into a full technical architecture, they tend to look like spaghetti, and most people have a hard time tracing through them. And 2, you don't want to give away all your business IP. So marketecture is a valid term. It was taught to me by IBM and their engineering teams. So I think all of us can go safely use it. But when I was walking through that earlier analogy on the earlier description on the first slide. So we have our Kubernetes cluster. We tend to like K3s because we like the lightness of it. And that's because we're doing the IoT on the edge, right? So that lets us run the same clusters and the same containers, both on the cloud and the edge. So from that cloud, we can manage our deployments, and we can manage the deployments to all the devices, because currently we have them all in a single mesh, so all the devices go back to the same cloud. And that creates some learning experiences sometimes. I don't know if they've released it yet, but the team will be releasing a patch to Kilo, which is one of the meshing tools that you can use in Kubernetes. Because what we found was there was a major bug that was driving a lot of cost. The way the system had been architected, Kilo and Calico were arguing about the DNS routing within the cluster, which is not bad if it's maybe only 1 or 2 nodes. But when you're managing significantly more, you all of a sudden start going, I've got 36 worker nodes that are dedicated just to Kilo routing. Something might be off about this. So the team was able to go through and diagnose it, and they just put the patch in our production recently. I think they're going to be releasing it to Kilo shortly. And it cut us down from 30 nodes for Kilo down to, I think it was like 6, something like that. Because there was a technical bug in the way Kilo and one of the networking libraries in Linux interacted. Things were going into an infinite loop, and until you got that fixed, it was kind of an ugly situation that put a lot of work for the team. So they were able to fix that. So that's where you've got to think about sometimes the complexity of your system, and simple has some benefits sometimes. So, I'm going to switch a little bit here. We've been talking about some things. I've been trying to pepper risks in, but these are things you've got to think about. Security is one of the things that I mentioned that you've got to think about. That's got to be top of mind in the current world. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who have more free time than not, and they spend that trying to break into systems. And the way your system is vulnerable may not be the way you think about it. Because I spend so much time in IoT, a lot of times the threat is not to me. The threat is to my customer. Because if someone can find a way through my system into their network, that's bad for my customer, and it's worse for me because I was the one who facilitated it. So if we think about it, I think the boogeyman for a lot of brands and restaurants and other systems that I've worked with has been thermostats, because that's how Target was compromised. Their HVAC system was compromised, and then someone got in and put the credit card scraper into their POS image. There have been a number of casinos where either their thermostat or their fish tank thermostat were compromised, and people got onto the network and they were able to make a jump and start to do a ransomware attack in at least one of the casinos. So that's something you've got to think about as you build your system. It really can't be an afterthought as you go through. I think the other thing is, and I've talked about this with AI, right? You've got to make sure the tools you're bringing are the right solution for the business problem, because we all love shiny new technology. And if you were sitting with my team and I yesterday, I lost track of the number of technologies and new programming languages that people wanted to go try or do. But you've got to make sure it's an application to what the right application for the business problem you're solving. Otherwise, you may not actually be able to build something that works. And I will also go on record that Mongo is never the right answer. It may be an answer, but it's not the right one. We can debate that afterwards, but that's still got scars. And never use it in payment processing systems. I've seen that go wrong for someone. The other thing that we think a lot about is regulatory, because we tend to find, particularly with the type of solutions we build, if you're just building a website, regulatory is not a big deal. But my background was in manufacturing with PPE and safety equipment. There's a ton of regulatory there to make sure employees don't get hurt. As we've moved into the food space, I still have all those same regulatory things in different ways I have to think about. As I'm building the things for the medical space and the life sciences, regulatory is important. How are we protecting people's data according to the regulations? What can people do with it? I.e., if my data scientist wants to go play with something, I can't just give them all the patient data. Wouldn't be good. Something bad would happen. So you have to think about that both as you architect your solution and as you're going through and talking with people about what do they want to do and how do they do it. Then the last piece is there's always a legacy system in the mix. Everyone will tell me you've got greenfield. No. There's some brownfield in there somewhere. There's something you're going to have to connect to. So be prepared for it. You're going to have to deal with it. So I think we have roughly 5 minutes left. So just want to open it up if anyone has any questions. Yeah, and I've got a marketing person yelling, there's slides I'm supposed to get to. There we go. If you want to contact me, you can find me here at LinkedIn. But while I'm here, you can go ask questions. And this is a slide I never actually get to because I always get too involved in the questions. So.
If you're too shy to ask questions, please contact Ben at his LinkedIn as well. take personal questions, but any lab questions we can take now. Just
Tell me you saw me here, just so I know you're actually real people and not LinkedIn bots.
So I think that you are used to apply some I forgot these standards for security, and that now that you work with the U.S. based in the U.S. So are you familiar with FedRAMP and how easy it is to comply with FedRAMP using your infrastructure or your model? That you use?
So FedRAMP is a couple of things. One is your infrastructure, and then it's your actual application itself. I've run streaming from FedRAMP and avoided it so far. There's a similar thing that's not quite as secure. So for those of you who understand, FedRAMP is, in the US, if you're going to deal with a federal agency, that's what you're required to do. Different states have it. So I have encountered it through Texas, and their version is honestly a little weird. It's Texas. But some universities are doing the same thing. But it gets to what is all your infrastructure, and usually you're gonna be best to go host with someone whose infrastructure is already done. So use Amazon's FedRAMP Cloud or Azure, one of those. And then depending on that, what data you have, you're gonna have to look at how it applies to what you're gonna have to do for the security of it.
It's very specific. It's very case specific, I think. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Ben, one question.
Yep.
Related to this regulatory space, for example, on the life science will be HIPAA or
HIPAA.
How do you go to this regulation? I know you have to go and check this under compliance, but who is going to go and say, oh, you are under compliance, you are not under compliance?
So it's going to depend on exactly which standard you're working with, but with something like HIPAA, you probably would want to bring in an outside auditor. It's the same way like SOC is something, Security Operations Control, whatever it stands for. That's one where you're going to go put your processes in place, and then you're best served to have an auditor give an opinion that you're doing it correctly. That's going to be a little different for every standard, and then if you're working for a customer, it may actually be the customer who audits you because they've got that in-house. Like we find that with the life science space at least.
So from your point of view, like I remember back then, like IoT devices weren't like done in security perspective wise. Do you think that's getting better or?
I think it is. I think there's a lot of old IoT devices out there. The first ones that I put out were before you could really call the internet. So the first ones I put out were like 96, 98. So things have come a long way. And the hardest thing is that when you've got a product that is no longer, particularly in business, so this is a little different with consumers, right? Consumers, I can say, hey, I'm just not supporting it and shut it off. We've seen Google do that. It kills us, right? Our favorite device no longer works. But in industry, you end up having to keep a product for much longer. I've got some IoT products that I first deployed in 2006 that are still in the field. So remember now what's happened since then. I had SSL in there, but there's been Heartbleed and all kinds of other SSL. So how do I patch that? And how do I patch that on an old device that maybe I don't have enough compute to go do whatever their standard is? So I think it's gotten better, and there's more regs coming. There was under Biden a U.S. An executive order that was some guidance. It wasn't actually rules, but it was guidance they were supposed to look at. The EU has a similar one. The EU one is actually a little harder because it's going to maintain supportability and patching as part of it. The U.S. one was mostly that you had to have a software bill of materials for the device. So it's getting better, but it's still going to be complex. I think it's going to be a while because sometimes you're dealing with limited compute, so there's not a lot you can do.
So, one question. For this stuff, then it's great to you to get another company to go and do this stuff for you, or you used to have this in-house. What would be great for a company? I'm thinking like business, as you said.
So to build the solution or to audit?
Maintain and all this stuff and to be on compliance.
So I think it's going to depend on what your business is. If the product is core to what your business model is, you should have much of that in-house. You may not have the full auditor in-house, but you've got someone who's internally running one, so you can pass an external audit much faster. If it is something that is ancillary to your business, then it's probably better to outsource it because it's going to be really hard for you to build those expertise.
Ben, have you ever worked with Latin American countries companies or no?
Yeah, I've got a team here. I've got a team in Costa Rica or in Colombia. Sorry.
Okay, so my question is, based on your experience now that you know more about compliance and that kind of things that are more like federal, what would you suggest there is like a good opportunity for Costa Rica at the government level as a country to invest in cybersecurity? What's our like the main focus we should take for that, based on your experience and based also in the in the United States there is a lot of laws regarding data like NIST, like FedRAMP, like IESO, So based on your experience using that, implementing that over there, how would you say will be what fit best in Costa Rica?
So I would say is to come up with a national level of standards. So that Europe has a region, I'll call it regional, right? For the EU, you've got GDPR. If I'm dealing within a European country, these are the rules I have to apply to. The US is a lot more chaotic. They've got a lot of guidelines, a lot of optional things, and then it varies by state. So there's no one rule I can do to say, I'm going to be privacy compliant, because California has theirs, Colorado has theirs, which are slightly different. They're modeled on GDPR. Massachusetts has one. Illinois has some heinous biometric laws, so I can't use facial recognition there. Give me one standard. So one standard makes life a lot easier. Even though we all hate complying with it, at least you know what rule you're playing by. And you're not, we were talking about football as I walked by, and so we playing American football, we playing European football. Big difference there in what happens. I've been told I have to stop. So
That's everything.
find me outside. I'm glad to keep talking to you.
Thank you.